Hello, everybody. Welcome to the April edition of NetElixir University's webinar series. Thank you all for joining. I know we have a few people that continue to trickle in, but we're going to get started now, as promised. Today, we're all here to talk about voice assistants and voice search, something that has been on the front pages of many magazines, newsletters, websites, and blogs you're all reading about, and something that is still so mysterious, right? We still don't know a lot about it. So what we wanted to do at NetElixir was dig in, try to understand as much we could about voice search, and try to present those results to you today. On the agenda, first, we're going to talk about the rise of voice, its importance in the market, and why voice search has taken such a big share of our attention in recent months. Next, we're going to share some of our own research and methodology with you and talk about findings from a survey we did in Q1 that focused strictly around voice assistants and search. We'll share those key findings, and then we'll jump into some of the implications for retailers, some of the questions that have yet to be answered, and potential challenges that are on the way. Finally, we'll finish up with some voice-first tips and share ideas we have with you that you can use instantly to help you prepare for the coming voice search revolution. Now, I am pleased to be joined today by Alyssa Zaremba, the marketing manager of NetElixir.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining.
Alyssa ran our research survey and will be taking us through all of those slides and helping me out along the way. And for those of you who have been joining our last few webinars, I hope you remember me. I'm Steve Murphy, the Director of Marketing at NetElixir, and the one who helps to coordinate these webinars. So before we get started, I want to share a little bit about NetElixir for those of you who are new to our brand. We are a search marketing agency dedicated to decoding what makes people click. What do I mean by that? Well, we're not just looking at the numbers when we work with you. We are fanatically analytical, but we also understand that your customers are people. They have motivations, they have wants and needs, and we believe that it's so important to understand the people behind the purchases before we can jump into the numbers. That way, everything we do for our clients makes sure that our work is customer focused and bringing you the best possible customers long term. We provide paid search services, SEO, display marketing, paid social on Facebook, Pinterest, and Instagram, Amazon marketing services, and different marketing technology solutions for all of our clients. Our agency is composed of 130 plus employees across 3 global offices. We currently service over 120 active retail e-commerce brands, including some of the most well-known folks like Lenovo, Teleflora, Ashley Stewart, Century 21, Corel Brands, Rainbow, Bebe, Dover Saddlery, and hundreds of others. Our fanatically analytical team is proud to boast over 315 Google certifications, making us one of the most qualified search marketing agencies you can find in the United States. Finally, we're proudly a Google Premier partner, a Bing Select agency, and the preferred search marketing partner for UPS in the US. Shout out to all my UPS reps I saw. How are you all? Great. But we're not here to talk about NetElixir today. We're here to talk about the meteoric rise of voice search in the general public. According to ComScore, by 2020, half of all searches will be voice. Half. Now, if you had asked me to predict what that number would have been towards the middle of last year, I might have told you 20%, 15 even, to be a little conservative. And yet, we've been proven completely wrong. And according to many other corroborating sources, we see that voice will likely be above 45% and closer to 50% by the next 2 to 2.5 years. So how in the world is this even possible? How could a technology that we know so little about already be getting so much mainstream attention? Well, the first reason is because voice is extremely low friction, right? Talking to your phone just seems natural, right? We all like to have conversations, and when our phones or devices talk back to us, it's something we can relate to. We don't have to learn some fancy new syntax. We're not learning to code. We're simply having a conversation, and that's something that really anyone from any age group can get behind. And better yet, the technology is already built into our phones, right? We already have the hardware to make voice technology work. Every phone has a microphone, every phone has a screen, and they're all built to give and receive information. And that's why the install numbers we've seen have been absolutely staggering, right? So this is claimed device install. So this is according to each and every one of these brands and not necessarily confirmed by outside sources. But regardless, the numbers are absolutely staggering. We have Google Assistant, which claims 400 million active installs as of earlier this year. That's across their Android phones, that's across their dedicated smart assistants, and that's included in several of the co-branded hardware that they're launching with other brands. Now, Amazon Alexa claims 20 million device installs. These numbers are from Jeff Bezos's 2017 analyst call. I'm sure since last holiday season, those numbers have at least doubled. And with Alexa getting so much mainstream support from third-party brands, you can anticipate that the install base is going to continue to grow at an incredible rate. And even two of the players that we don't consider leaders right now have absolutely massive install bases. Siri, the first real voice assistant launched by Apple a few years ago, is on over 500 million devices, from the HomePods to the iPhones to the iPad and every device in between. Apple makes sure to continuously plug in Siri into all of its hardware. And Microsoft has done the same with Cortana, with over 400 million installs across things like Windows Phone, Windows 10, Xbox, and a variety of other products. So as you can see, we've already laid the foundation for a massive eruption in the voice assistant and voice search industry. And on top of that, consumer adoption is really high, right? Let's look at dedicated smart speakers, right? According to NPR, we've seen 16% of all US households purchase a dedicated smart speaker device. And believe it or not, this outpaces the adoption rate of mobile phones and tablets. So not even speaking about the built-in install base on all of our phones, people want these dedicated smart speakers and smart objects and are buying them at an alarmingly high rate. So because of this, we absolutely needed to understand why consumers use voice technology. It's important to our agency, it's important to our clients, and it's important to understand how different consumers are using the technology and adopting it. And for this segment, I'm going to introduce Alyssa, who will walk through the survey methodology and share some of the most interesting results with each and every one of you.
Okay, great. Thanks, Steve. So in order to better understand how consumers use voice search, we conducted a survey through Google Consumer Surveys, targeting people who currently use voice search or voice-activated virtual assistants like Siri, Alexa, Cortana, and Google Home. So in February of this year, we sent a 10-question digital survey out through Google's Publishers Network, and we targeted over 1,000 respondents in the United States. We were curious to know about consumer usage, particularly as it related to purchasing behaviors, and consumer sentiments around voice-sponsored content, which was really interesting. We wanted to allow for only active voice search users to qualify for the survey, so we were first able to see how many people use voice search. We found 20% of respondents are actively using voice assistants, with close to 18% noting that they used to use it, but not anymore. Over half of voice assistant users only began using the technology within the past 2 years or so. So that suggests that we're still in the early adopters phase of the technology. Interestingly, we did not find any significant correlation between usage and age or gender, but this was really expected since it coincides with the notion that age really isn't a clean indicator for early adoption of technology. It's more a factor of personality. We were also interested to see the frequency of use. How often are they using voice search? Just under half of respondents said they use voice search at least once a day, with 17% of those saying they use it multiple times per day. So while the majority of the market has yet to adopt voice search, those who have are relying on it really heavily as part of their daily routine. But how are they using it, and for what are they using it for? Most people use voice search via mobile, which is not surprising due to the number of mobile devices in circulation compared to the other devices that we had listed in the survey, especially since, as Steve mentioned, voice assistants now come built into mobile devices. We can see, though, in the second spot, there are dedicated home assistants. So 35% of voice searches are being conducted via screenless technology, such as Google Home or Amazon Echo. Okay, most frequently used voice actions. We asked which voice commands respondents use most often. 55% of people use voice assistants for entertainment purposes, which wasn't really a surprise. They're using it to play music and other media. The second and third most frequent uses are to set a timer or a calendar reminder, and also to read the news or the weather. I did want to highlight, though, the 28% of people using voice search for shopping-related activities. 8% of people said they use most frequently voice search to purchase an item, and 20% said they use it to find information related to a purchase. Voice search is already a part of consumers' path to purchase, as we can see through this data. We can see that this mode of search attracts more top-of-funnel behavior, though, like researching or asking questions. So while the tides are changing in the favor of mobile, shoppers are still more comfortable completing purchases on desktop over mobile, and even less comfortable completing a purchase via a voice assistant, right? What are you comfortable buying without really seeing? So unless a technology advances in voice search and consumer behavior shifts with this, shoppers will still want to engage more of their senses before buying something. You know, if I can't go to the store to feel it and try it on, I at least want to be able to see it. And if I can't see it, it better be a phenomenal product description that beckons me to buy the product without seeing it, or a commodity product that is a safer choice to buy without a screen.
And Alyssa, one important thing to note there, 28% of people that are using it are trying to take shopping actions. What's most interesting to me about that stat is that none of the major voice assistants have even announced a plan for monetization yet. So
Right.
This is a behavior that's happening organically without brands or advertisers or publishers even prompting it to happen. It's something that's taken a life of its own, which is very encouraging because it means that the demand is already there for when different publishers like Google or Amazon do begin to monetize this technology.
Now, that's a great point. Once brands like Google start to advocate this as a main function or a possible function of these technologies, we will expect this percentage to really take off, especially as the technology advances. So for that 8% that were comfortable making a purchase via voice, we were curious to see what they were actually buying. Entertainment took the top spot with a little less than half of respondents noting buying things like books, music, and other media. The second most popular purchase category was actually everyday household items. 26% of people bought things like tissues, food, other commodity items through their voice assistants. The category that had the lowest number of responses was apparel. Interestingly, the percent of apparel purchases via voice search varied by the device that was used. So screenless devices such as voice assistants like Amazon Echo and Google Home showed the smallest share of apparel purchases in comparison to other devices, while voice searches that occurred on mobile or desktop showed a higher percent share of apparel purchases. So this just further validates that consumers are not really yet comfortable shopping for things like apparel without a visual aid. Okay, well, we know people are using voice search and that it can be a revenue generating mode of search for retailers. So how can retailers make sure they're taking over that coveted position 0 and being heard by voice searchers? Can we run sponsored ads? As Steve mentioned, currently the answer is no. There's no monetization of voice search in place. This is largely due to Google, Amazon, Apple, and Bing's sensitivity to user experience. People don't really want to be bombarded with what sounds like a radio ad from Nike when we ask things like, okay, Google, what are the best running sneakers, right? Or so we thought. So we wanted to get to the bottom of this. Are there any circumstances where voice-sponsored ads might be welcomed by consumers? The answer from our study was actually yes. The majority of respondents said they would actually welcome voice ads under a certain condition. 38% of people would be fine with sponsored content if the ad was relevant to them as a consumer. Others were open to ads if they occurred at a certain point in the purchase process, like when researching or asking for advice about a specific product. Only 10% said they would never welcome advertising on voice at all. But I do want to note that we had an open text field here, and the around 130 responses that would have never welcomed sponsored voice content were very emotionally charged responses. They said things like, under no condition, I'll stop using voice search first, or, you know, I'm already paying to use the device. I don't want sponsored content on top of it. But again, that was only 10% of our respondents, so it is important to continue to practice hyper-targeting and ensuring that you're speaking to your customers' interests and intentions throughout their digital journey, and in anticipation for whenever our tech giants decide to monetize this mode of search. So those were a few stats from our recent research, but we have more available, and you can access our full report simply by visiting netelixir.com/voice. Okay, next I'm just going to pass it back to Steve to go over the implications that voice search has on retailers and brands and how to best optimize for this mode of search today. So Steve, take it away.
Thank you, Alyssa. Eye-opening stats there. I do encourage everyone to check out that research report. I know you and your team worked very hard and put tremendous effort in, so it was a wonderful read. That was interesting to dig inside the mind of the consumer, but unfortunately, it kind of created more questions than answers, we found, because when we debriefed after, we said we could see there's traction with voice, but we can't quite understand what all those implications would be. Now, I wish I could sit here and tell you I have all the answers, everything's going to be okay, just listen to what I tell you and you'll win in the voice game, but I don't yet. And instead, I first wanted to share some of the potential implications for retailers and brands that we thought could evolve as voice gains more traction in the market. The first thing we have to consider is that consumer search behavior is very much likely to change, and we're already seeing some signs of that. People aren't using voice search the same way they use screen search. They use more natural language. They use conversational tone. And in fact, in a study by Think with Google, 41% of people who own a voice-activated speaker say it feels like talking to a friend or another person, right? And that relates back to what we said earlier. Because this is such a natural thing for humans to be able to engage in conversations, it means that we don't follow the typical search pattern of dropping in 3 keywords to get us there fast. Instead, we're more likely to have a conversation, ask a full question, or lengthen our queries significantly. So we will have to keep that in mind, that the same search behavior that worked in the past might not be replicated when voice goes mainstream. Secondly, and I know this is tough for folks who are in the apparel space and other highly visual spaces, but you're going to have a lot less reliance on visuals to tell your story, right? As of right now, 35% of people using voice search are doing so without a screen in front of them. This means you have to wow them, right? You don't have your big images, you don't have your carousels, you don't have your videos, you don't have your fit guides and your style books and all the other resources you can use in traditional search and websites that you're going to have available to customers on voice. So you're going to have to find a way to adapt your message and make sure that you tell a very compelling story without the help from visuals. Next, there are way too many algorithmic questions that we still don't know the answer to. Will search engines prioritize the same factors and the same results that they do for traditional search? Or will they be considering completely different factors based on the context and intent of a search query done by voice rather than a search query done by keyboard? And here's a quick example that I tried running earlier this week to see if I can get a completely unscientific answer, right? So on my computer, I did a search for best humidifiers, right? And as we can see, this is well known to all of you. We have a very diverse search engine results page. It has shopping results. It has visual cues like reviews and prices. It has paid search ads, and it even has a knowledge graph, quick answer box to top off the above the fold content. But when I did this same search and adapted it for voice, I used a conversational tone and I asked my Google Assistant, what's the best humidifier? As you could see, I got a completely different result. In fact, I've highlighted there, I know it might be a little hard to see depending on your screen size, but this Levoit humidifier LV600HH came up first in the list in my voice search, and yet that same product doesn't exist anywhere on their traditional screen search. So this is really interesting to me because I had assumed that Google might show me the exact same results based on my intent. And even though the sample size is 1, and it's, again, completely anecdotal, I was interested to see that I didn't get the same results and, in fact, got something way different between my voice search and my desktop search. So, again, we don't know how this algorithm question is going to shake out, but it is something that each and every one of you should be thinking about as we dive into the age of voice. Will voice search favor brands? Right? This is something that our CEO has done sound bites about all over the press. It's something that a lot of folks are talking about. When you ask Alexa, order me laundry detergent, is that algorithm, is that system going to evaluate the best possible products for you based on your shopping history, based on your other preferences, based on what's on sale? Or is it simply going to come back to whatever brand pays the most money for that ad? We don't know the answer, and we don't know how consumers are going to be making those choices, because the way that choices are made on the visual web is significantly different than the way that choices are made when we're getting audio cues. All this is wrapped up with more questions, and these are just a few of the ones you should be asking yourselves as you look to prepare a strategy for the oncoming voice search revolution. Now, that being said, we don't want to leave you with just a pile of questions and no answers. We do have some recommendations that we believe can help you think voice first before you need to think voice first. And I do see some questions rolling in. I want to thank all of you. This is great. Please know I will jump in at the end and we'll answer some of those questions. But please keep them coming so that way we can just roll with it when we get there. The first thing that we recommend you do, and please, I'm not pandering. I know this seems really obvious, but I feel I have to say it. You have to learn the technology and review the software development kits for all the different voice search agents if you really truly want to understand how the technology works. So each of the major four, Google, Apple, Microsoft, and Amazon, have robust developer courses on exactly what you can do with each of their voice assistants. They are relying on third parties and outsiders to start adopting this so that they can begin to build their monetization strategy. I recommend not only sending this to your web development and technology team, but also include your SEO team, include your brand team, and include your digital marketing team. Because when all of you understand what the capabilities and limitations are, it will allow you to understand how you can use voice for your brand and start planning unique, creative ways to do it before it becomes fully mainstream. So I will send out an email with the links to all four of those developer resources in our follow-up email. So please be sure to take a look at that and really begin studying all the different things that you can do with the different assistants. Secondly, start thinking about crafting content as a conversation, right? As we talked about before, people aren't following the same behaviors that they once did, and we can't rely on the same types of keyword research and content development that we have for the past few years, right? Take, for example, this study that Moz did. When they looked at searches and broke it into text inputs versus voice inputs, you could see that most text queries huddle up between 1 to 3 words with long tail really flattening out towards the end. But with the same said for voice inputs, you could see most of voice searches are kind of grouping up between 2.5 to 4 words. And the long tail there is a lot wider than it was for text inputs. This is giving us some indication that people are more likely to speak in full sentences and not drop gap words and stop words like they would in a traditional search. So to take advantage of this, we want you to start thinking about all the ways you can incorporate this natural language into your website content. For example, what about frequently asked questions pages? This is nothing new. This is something people have been doing forever. But why not beef up your FAQs to make sure that you're capturing more of the people that are searching for what you're offering and potentially getting those results in a voice search or voice assistant style. And secondly, don't be afraid to use colloquial language, right? I know as a fact when I write, I do it differently than when I speak. So I encourage all of you to think about writing like you speak, because there's a good chance that your content could be read aloud by a voice assistant, and you want to make sure that it sounds natural and matches the same types of language that your customers are currently using. And on that note, the third thing we recommend is taking a page from the accessibility playbook, right? Having a device read our content actually isn't new. It's been happening for decades. And we can go back to folks with disabilities who have been using screen readers and speaking to screen devices, again, for over a decade and a half now. One thing you can do is run your website through some of these web accessibility tests to see if you have the basics built out. You can use a website like WebAIM, which stands for Web Accessibility in Mind, which will help give you all the best practices, guidelines, and other information you need to make sure that your website meets those bare minimum requirements. And when you build with accessibility in mind, it's also going to help in other areas. First of all, it's going to help you with your SEO. It's going to make sure that you're doing things that allow browsers to properly parse all the different text and content on your site. And you're going to likely be including some more semantic information to make sure that search engine crawlers can understand the context of different things listed on your site. It's also great, again, from the most basic standpoint, to make sure that you're hitting all your customers, right? Have you been serving the needs of those individuals with disabilities over the years? And is your website ready to handle the oncoming voice assistant surge that may be reading your content aloud? So check that out. It's webaim.org, I believe. We'll send that link out as well in our follow-up email for all of you to check out. Next, I know we've been beating this dead horse for a while here at NetElixir between our SEO week last month and many of our other presentations. But if you haven't yet, you need to embrace structured data, right? It's around for a while, it's encouraged by the search engines, and it's going to help voice assistants pick out cues and answers for questions people are talking about. Let's take this one, for example. When you're asking, how many calories are in real Texas chili? Instead of the voice assistant having to figure out what that number is, in this example, food.com actually marked that content up with schema clues, right? So we could see they have the class of calories, item prop equals calories, and then 331.9. That's giving the search engines and the voice assistant the proper cues to know that this is the calorie count so that they can read the answer aloud and hopefully put your search result in the proper listing on Google. Right? Next, I know this doesn't apply for everyone, but maybe for some of the larger brands that we have on the call, why not think about using actions and skills for your existing app, right? So for those of you who aren't familiar, actions and skills are specific instructions you can build that tell a voice search agent how to handle information on your website. So in Google's SDK, they call it actions. In Alexa's, they call it skills. So let me share a couple of the interesting ones that we discovered when doing the research here. Google has something called app transactions. It's kind of hidden away in their developer resources, but we thought it was really interesting because you can actually start working with the Google Assistant API to try to teach it how to let people finish transactions on their phone with voice search using your app. So it will read aloud different options in your checkout process, asking them and prompting them to select certain things, asking if they want to use the credit card on file, do they want to calculate their total, do they want to use their home address that's listed, right? And allowing someone through voice inputs to complete a transaction on their phone. And when you have chubby thumbs like I do, this is a godsend because you won't believe how many transactions I've abandoned because I couldn't type it in to my phone. So this is a really interesting piece of technology. I'll be honest, I don't know the adoption rates. I haven't gotten an official word from Google yet on how well this is being utilized, but it is a really interesting piece of technology that your development team can start working on now so that when it does hit mainstream, it's something you're ready for. And on Alexa's side, I think Alexa, personally, I would say she's or that technology is farthest along of all of them, that already has skills built in for transactions. For example, you could tell Starbucks to start your order. You can order a Lyft, and you can even, if you're feeling hungry, order a pizza from Domino's. And Alexa already has those skills built in to allow that to happen. So I encourage your brand, if you do have an app, get creative, right? Start thinking of ideas and ways to incorporate skills into your app, so that way you're ahead of the curve and able to put together unique experiences for your different customers. And next, step 6, again, this doesn't apply to everyone, especially pure e-commerce players, but if you run an e-commerce and physical brick and mortar locations, it's important that those teams coordinate with each other to make sure that your local presence is properly set up, right? One of the most common use cases for voice assistants is for people asking for local information. Google, navigate to XYZ restaurant in this town, or even saying, what's the nearest Macy's to me, right? So if you're doing that search, and I provided a few screenshots of different ones I tried earlier this week, you can see if that information is wrong, it creates a terrible experience for the customer. There's nothing worse than saying navigate to this place and it takes you in the completely wrong direction because you closed that store down and forgot to update the address on your Google My Business page. And in the same light, you want to make sure, on a positive note, that you're showing the best possible information. Again, if you take a look at the Macy's one, when I did a voice search for Macy's in Princeton, New Jersey, and clicked through, it showed me the reviews for the store, the hours of the store, where it's located, how to get there, and even reviews and products and photos, right? So make sure that your digital team is coordinating with your brick and mortar to make sure you're taking advantage of these really easy wins, because people are already using this in voice and we don't want to give them a bad experience. Now, before we jump to questions and answers, I did want to have one more reminder. Please check out the Search Without Screens research report. You can get that at www.netelixir.com/voice. That is available now, and we really do encourage you to get it because we share a lot more interesting findings that we weren't able to get to today. And because we have a few minutes left, we are going to now jump into some of the questions, and I hope we can answer them. So someone asks, isn't learning the technology in SDKs a bit more time-intensive process? Yeah, it is. I'm not going to lie. Something like this is going to require hard work, and because there's so little known about where voice will evolve in the next few years, we have to do our homework. We have to do the research, and we have to prepare for any of the possibilities. So this may not be something that your brand wants to spend time on, but if you want to innovate and be a leader in this space, I do highly recommend that you take the time, understand the technology, and maybe not dig too deep into the coding itself, but at least as a marketer, understand what it can do and what it can't do so that you can understand what the limitations are. Thank you. That's a great question. Okay. And then someone asked earlier, were the purchases for online purchasing? Oh, so on the earlier slide Alyssa shared, they were asking, when you ask people, are they purchasing with voice search, was this for online or is this for the nearest retail store? Alyssa?
Sure. So the way we framed the question to respondents are, if you're talking about what type of purchasing, and that question, we asked what type of purchases have you made using voice search or virtual assistants? So by nature of the question, the responses around the types of purchases were made through their voice search through a virtual assistant or their through their phone, but through voice search. So it is not necessarily online. It could have happened through their Google Home or their Alexa device, or through their mobile or desktop, really, if they were using voice search to make that purchase. Not for looking for the nearest retail store. It was for actually completing a purchase and making a conversion through voice.
Great, thank you, Alyssa. Emmanuel asks, how do I measure voice searches driving traffic to my site via Google Analytics or some other analytics tool? We don't really know yet. There is no standardized method. There are some things I believe you can do in Google Webmaster Tools, but I don't think they're anywhere close to accurate. We actually had our mobile marketing bootcamp last week in New York, and we had an entire team from Google there. And when we asked them this question, they said, we don't really know yet, because again, it's really hard to separate and segregate voice because it's coming from so many different places. So in the meantime, you have to hold tight, but I have a feeling based on some of the responses I've been getting that Google and others will be making this announcement at their yearly conference in 2018. Don't quote me on it, it's a gut feeling, but I feel pretty good that we're building up to a big announcement around voice as early as this summer. Okay, and I'm being asked, what about small scale retailers, right? Understanding all of this and learning all of this is a huge barrier. They would definitely need help from the outside or other technical expertise. I agree, right, yeah. Alyssa? It's not something every brand can focus on right now, but that doesn't mean there aren't small things you can do to help you prepare.
Yeah, and to Steve's point, I think a lot of the recommendations we made around being voice search also has its benefits through traditional SEO, especially on mobile optimization. So while it may be difficult for you as a small retailer to dive really heavy into the development aspect and create skills and actions, you can still be doing the basics around making sure you have structured data in place, which not only helps on voice, but helps you in traditional search as well. Updating your local listings, right? So all those actions you can take now will have an effect on voice naturally.
Yeah, and even creating conversational content. I mean, anyone can do that at this point. It really requires no extra technical skills. So while I understand it may be difficult for smaller brands, and to be honest, even larger brands who don't have the resources to put behind this, there are things on the small scale that you can start doing to start building momentum going into mass adoption of voice. Great, so we're just about out of time. We do want to thank everyone for joining us. It is 2:44. I promised to get you out the door by 2:45. Thank you all again for joining us today. Please come back next month. We'll be doing a little bit more of a small business focus next month. So for those of you who are smaller retailers, please join us then as we give you some paid search tips. And for everyone else, we will be sending you a copy of the slides. We thank you for joining. We encourage your feedback, and we look forward to seeing you next month. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.